welcome everybody to yet another session of JBPM 5. So we have kind of marathon of JBPM 5 today. The difference between the sessions that we already had and this one is that both Tiho and Chris has talked about stuff that is already in place. So this is something that you can already use. I'm going to just talk about a concept on theory, how we can deploy both JBPM 5 stuff and Drools together with events on JBoss AS 7 in a bit different way than the default one. So what is it all about? So it's just to build a comprehensive BPM platform on top of Drools and JBPM, which are already very powerful piece of software. So how we can make it truly, how we can make use of those projects that will truly accelerate our business. So yeah, that of course sounds very nice, but yeah, what's that in reality? So I will start with a couple of questions on that I believe are quite characteristic to how we could achieve the more enterprise level of having BPM. So first of all, how easy is to introduce new processes or new version of your processes on the running environment? Or how to change the logic? Of course, we can have externalized logic that runs somewhere else, and our process just invokes it over the wire. How to upgrade your environment? Of course, the software is evolving, so new version of both Drools and JBPM will come out soon, and either way, you have to update it, upgrade to the new version to make use of the bug fixes, new features, and so on. And of course, migration of your active processes. Chris, on the previous session, mentioned that there is a process instant migration, but not every single case is possible to be migrated. And that's probably the reality that most of the cases is not as easy as we would like to have it. So what's the goal of having this, as I call it, the enterprise way of deploying the business processes and rules? So first of all, to be able to introduce new processes, new version of processes, without affecting the already existing one. And it goes both in terms of process definitions, the same as the process state and the running instances. To change the business logic that processes are relying on. Of course, if we have something that, let's have a very simple example, that we have Java classes that are invoked by the process. Java services, we can call them. We introduce new version that changes the Java logic. How we can make sure that new process will run with the new version of the Java logic, but the old one will still continue on the previous versions. If it comes to this upgrade process of the runtime itself, it's definitely a very useful feature if we can run this different version, various versions of the runtime at the same time. So we can let the process already existing continue on the old version of the runtime and the new one coming on with the new runtime as soon as it is available. From the development point of view, maybe we should not even be concerned about the session management. We know that the sessions are used to interact with the knowledge base and to run the processes on the server. But do we really need to, from the application point of view, do we really need to know that this session identifier is used for this process or not? Maybe we can just externalize and say, okay, I'm user 1, and I would like to run my processes as user 1. Just give me my session that I used previously. I don't care if it was ID 1 or ID 100. I'm just the same user, just give me the same session. It is persistent, so I should get it without any problem. Do not worry about the process version. Of course, the business will strive to provide the new features of the process to the end user as soon as it is possible. So why we need to change the application because of the business process has changed? We would like to invoke it as soon as it's possible. We deploy a new version is available, our application doesn't have to be deployed once again because only the business process logic has changed. The application that is making use of that logic doesn't have to be changed because of the version, because of the version was upgraded. Yeah, and the same goes for the simplicity, or simplify usability of the engine. It should be as simple as possible. If we would like to start the process, we just call, yeah, give me a session, and I start the process. I don't need to care if the persistence is set up there from the client, so to say, perspective. I just call it, yeah, there is an engine. I would like to execute process on this engine, and I know the process identifier. I submit process identifier, couple of parameters. Off we go. So how we can at least try to achieve that? In fact, with JBoss AS7, we have the notion of JBoss modules. JBoss modules are a combined set of libraries that are considered as one artifact. All the dependencies will be brought into that module. So the whole point of this session is to describe that both jBPM and Drools are configured as JBoss modules, together with all their dependencies. They are versioned, so we can have number of jBPM and Drools running at the same time within the same application server. Then we have the OSGi level on top of JBoss modules. So the modules can be exposed as OSGi services as well, if there are any, that should be exposed to the outside world. So all the bundles can import them. So there are notions, there are a couple of elements introduced with a very thin layer of what I call JBoss Enterprise extension. This is a very thin layer on top of Knowledge API, which provides the execution engine factories and execution engines. Those artifacts will be exposed over OSGi service repository for the client execution. Execution engine factories are used by the business logic providers to register the knowledge API, knowledge base together with session configuration. And execution engines will be utilized by the client application to execute the business logic. Yeah. I'm not really good at drawing in PowerPoint, so as you can see. So it's just a very generic overview of the platform. So we have the JBoss AS7 with embedded OSGi service registry. Then we have the BPM module. This is the very thin layer of the API that is exposed to both process bundles and clients. And then we have different versions of jBPM and Drools module deployed on the application server. So what are the modules? What are the components? So first of all, the thin layer register several things in OSGi service registry to be looked up. And most important of them is the resolver manager. Resolver manager is used to find the correct execution engine for your request context. Based on that, the resolvers are able to figure out which execution engine you should be talking to at the current situation. That will come in more details later on, where we have more of the platform interactions, which component is talking to which and in what situation. Then, of course, we have the jBPM and Drools module that embeds the whole runtime together with all the dependencies. And each version of such module will register execution engine factory that is dedicated to that particular runtime version. So it will only use the runtime available features from that particular version, and only from that one. Then we have platform bundle or process bundle, depending on how we like to call it. This is the component that is delivered by the developers building business logic. This doesn't have to contain inside. It can refer to different sources like governor, file system, or whatever it is. The artifacts like business processes, business rules, event definitions. And on startup, it will bootstrap the execution engine using execution engine factories from a particular version of runtime. Once it is bootstrapped, it will register the execution engine on the OSGi service layer with a certain properties. And those properties will be used to look it up by resolvers. And then we have the client application, which is, in many cases, a end-user application that allows to interact with the process engine. Yeah, this is pretty much what just said. It's a very simple abstraction. The main purpose of having this abstraction is to not depend on the knowledge API interfaces directly from the client point of view. It's because the knowledge API changes as well, and it provides more and more features. This simple platform API will deliver a very simplified interface to interact with it. For example, yes, we have it here. The execution engine resolver is the first interface that is registered when the platform starts. This is a very simple interface, just saying that you can register resolvers, saying who is the owner and what's the resolver. As simple as that. And most of the cases, you will have very simplified interfaces. It won't expose the rich, full features that the knowledge API has. But this is the whole point of having this very simplified. If you want to start the process, just call the start the process. You don't need to worry about all the setup steps from the client application point of view. jBPM and Drools module. Yeah, the runtime that are bundled within the JBoss module with definition of the OSGi layer. So what service will be exposed, what is the activator, bundle activator, and so on. What packages are exported, what packages are imported. That will cover all dependencies of both Drools and jBPM in one single artifact. And of course, as mentioned before, it registers the execution engine factory. The last point is that it can as well register, and usually it does register resolvers supported by that particular version. About resolvers, it will be a little bit more because later on, because that's quite important piece of the platform. Here we have the execution engine factory interface. It just builds a new instances of execution engine based on given argument. The most important here is the callback object, because this is the implementation that could react on different events emitted by the platform. And one of such events could be before the session is created, before session is restored, or after session is restored, after knowledge base is created, before or after work item handler is registered. It's going to react, enhance a certain elements during the life cycle. So whenever platform starts up, and it will start up different components, you can receive the event notification from the execution engine as soon as they are emitted. The process bundle, this is the main component that makes use of the platform and delivers business functionality. This is where you put what processes should be bootstrapped by this particular process bundle. It builds up the execution engine using the execution engine factory from the runtime, which in fact is a wrapper around knowledge base. It will consist of the knowledge base inside. Provides a configurable session management based on business keys and user-defined strategies. There are a couple of strategies out of the box with the platform, but it is still possible to customize that, whatever end user would like to. And the execution engine after creation is registered in the OSGi service layer with a certain number of properties. And this is completely up to the implementer to define what properties will be used to register the service. And of course, that will be discoverable by the resolvers based on these properties and the request context. This is the signatures of the interface. So as you can see, there are no knowledge API interfaces within this interface. They are completely separated. So that's why we have the session delegate interface, which is very, very simplified version. Of course, the subject of this presentation was JBPM Drools, but since I'm mainly JBPM guy, I'm focusing on the process part of it. Since both JBPM and Drools are quite unified in terms of implementation APIs, that should apply to both as well, but of course with some modifications as well. And once again, this is just a concept. It's not something that you can just grab and start using. There are POC stuff that you can give it a test drive, but this still is far, far away from being usable. So this is the interaction from the process bundle point of view, how you interact with the platform to build up your logic that will be exposed to your clients. So first of all, you look up the execution engine factory using the version number that you would like to use. For example, you have the latest JBPM version 5.3. So you deploy such a module on JBoss AS 7. Then it will, as soon as the JBoss and OSGi layer start up, it will be bootstrap and execution engine factory with that version number will be registered and available to the other bundles to look up and make use of it. Once you have it, you can build on it the execution engine. Execution engine will be built based on your given configuration. The configuration at this point is especially in terms of resources that will compose the knowledge base. This is based on the chances, so you can define whatever resources you would like to have. And it's, of course, it could be embedded and used as a class path elements to be picked up from within the bundle, or you can refer to governor, you can refer to file system, and other resource types that are available there. Yeah, here we have the optional step as well, that each process bundle can register their custom resolvers as well. So for example, if someone decides that, my execution engine will be discovered by, let's say, tenant identifier in a multi-tenancy environment, and you define what is the structure of the tenant identifier, you can register that together with the execution engine. Okay, the execution engine will be discovered by this property with such value, and of course you need to deliver the resolver as well. So the clients can use that to pick up your execution engine properly. Yeah, client application. This is the ultimate client of the platform. This is the application that usually is exposed to end users that can start or interact with the process engine. The only stuff that it talks to is the OSGi service layer, service registry. This is the only entry point for the client. It doesn't know if it's process bundle with version 1, version 5. It doesn't care. It can react on the request basis as well. So if someone sends, okay, I have a request to start the process with version 1, just goes there, the resolver gets the request context and is able to find out the proper execution engine to execute it on that particular version of either engine or the process version, depending, of course, how it was registered. And this is the interaction from the client application point of view. So it just looks up the resolver manager because this is the entry point. Resolver manager is capable of finding the first of all, proper resolver, and second of all is the execution engine. And it could be done either in 2 steps or 1 step. You just said, okay, this is my request context. Find the most suitable element of the execution engine you can find with this request context. And you just get the execution engine and you operate on it, like start process, signal processes, find process instances, and so on. Yeah, those different colors, squares are the resolvers. And here is the code that is used by client application to start the process. So first of all, we get the reference from execution engine resolver manager from the OSGi service registry. Once we have that, we have the HTTP request context. And request contexts could be, in fact, whatever. This is a very simple interface that provides access to getting parameters or properties of a context. So you can just wrap it with HTTP request context, which in fact will just embed HTTP servlet request object and be able to get information out of it. The same can go for JMS message properties and so on and so on. Once we have the find and lookup on the resolver manager, which directly returns the execution engine if found, based on the request context parameters. And the last step is once we have that, we get the session, and we get the session by business key, not by the identifier. So the execution engine, based on defined strategy, will maintain this session for this particular key. So whenever you ask to get the session from the engine with the same key, you will get the same session. You don't have to worry about the identifier that was assigned by the database, for example. There could be a number of use cases where you can use either user ID, for example. You want to have a session that is tied to an user. Whenever user logs on to your application, you can use the same session because the session keeps state of this user. For example, rules, different facts inside it, different processes that are started by that session. You don't have to worry from the application point of view how to maintain that. This is done by the execution engine and the strategy defined. Yeah, now is the funny part with resolvers. Yeah, as already said, the resolver is responsible for finding an execution engine. And depending on the various implementation, it can be by a version property, or tenant identifier. It could be a valid time. You can define, for example, that your process bundle that brings in this set of artifacts, this set of processes, should be executed by a client only from, let's say, from 1st of January to end of May. Once it passed this date, it should start with executing a different version of the process. It should not create process instances based on that version or based on this runtime version. It should start using the new one so we can smoothly transition from one version to another without affecting the already existing processes. Yeah, default policy is that the first resolver that accepts the context will do the lookup. And by accept the context is just each resolver has the defined properties that it's expecting to have to be able to find the execution engine. And of course, when platform starts, several resolvers are out of the box registered. And the order of the registration by default decides on which resolver will get this. This is kind of a chain of responsibility, and it just iterates over all found registered resolvers on the resolver manager. And the first one that accepts the request context will be used to look up the engine. Yeah, here we have some of the default resolvers. We have the unique user identifier-based resolver, because almost every significant component of the platform has its own UUID. An execution engine is not an exception from it. So it will register itself with its own UUID in the registry as well. This is especially important in case when, if you're starting a process, this is not an issue, because the process will be started, regardless of the engine that is used. But what in case that you would like to signal a process, the already running process, you must make sure that you will signal it on the same engine that it was started. Otherwise, it won't be found. So this is how you can look up. So by specifying either explicitly UID of the engine or specifying the process instance ID, which is a composite ID. Each process that is a process instance identifier that is returned from the execution engine is a composite ID, having the unique identifier of the process instance and unique identifier of the execution engine on which it was started. So that way you can just simply exchange this process instance identifier between different parties within your environment and very easily to find the right execution engine to continue execution of that process instance. Next one is probably the most basic. It's version-based. So once you submit a version number of your process, for example, or version of the engine, that will be pick up, and the execution engine with that particular version number will be returned to you. Most likely, it is used for the versioning of the process definition. So we have a bundle that contains a version 1 and bundle that contains version 2. In some cases, you would like to use the old one. In some cases, you would like to use the new one. And then you decide based on the version attribute. The third one here is the valid time resolval. That, as I said, will accept the context if it was executed within a defined time frame. Which could be quite easy, quite useful for clients that do not want to explicitly say which version it should be invoking. It should rely on the what process, what execution engine delivers for a particular time. Yeah, and then we go to the session management concept. In many cases, the sessions are maintained on the database level because you would like to keep the session state during your shutdowns or log off, log out of users. And in the default place, in default deployment procedure, you have to maintain that identifier, this session management on your side, on the caller side. Because when you start the process, well, create a session, start the process, you have the session identifier. Then you have to keep that somewhere to be able to load the session afterwards. You dispose the session, fine, you cleaned up. But if you want to continue your operation, you have to load it up again. And then that's why you need to have this identifier. So the session management here is to use, instead of the internal identifier, use the business keys. Since most of the system has notion of business keys. And you most likely could match that to the execution engines as well, or the sessions. Like this example with the user identifier or department identifier. So whoever logs on to a system from a particular department, they should operate on the same session. For example, because they share information, share facts within the session. So the process should react in that particular area. Yeah, and it gets even more complex on the cluster environment because you should avoid executing the same session on different threads or different JVM, because then you will run into troubles on the persistence layer. So to help out with this, it's not a problem, but an issue. The platform provides us configurable session mapping strategies that allows you to define a simple mapping between your business key and identifier. You can still access that session identifier using the unique identifier generated by the database. It's not that you can only use the business keys. You have bidirectional way of accessing that. Yep, here we have the, And by default, session is registered when you build the execution engine. So this is how the engine knows that, I'm going to use this session strategy or that session strategy. If it's not specified, it will use the simply serializable map strategy. And here we have the available strategies. The first one is very simple and used for the standalone deployment. So you have a single server deployment where you can just specify, whenever something comes into the strategy that identifier is stored, it will just write it down to a serialized object on the disk. For the cluster strategies, it's we have Inifitispan based distributed map. It's pretty much the same, but it's distributed over number of nodes within the cluster, for example. This is very, very early stage of Inifitispan, so it's definitely experimental as the whole stuff. But the main issue with this is that it still do not guard you from concurrent usage of the same session, because it's distributed cache, so both nodes can access this information, and they will get the same unique identifier to load the session. So this must be still enhanced to secure that they won't be able to use the same session identifier on multiple nodes. Yep. Yeah, and how to make the engine configurable. Since we have the process bundles, and process bundles start up the business logic that the development or implementers provide. It will, in fact, build a knowledge base. It will prepare for creation of the session or loading of the session, restoring the sessions, register work items. So in most cases, implementers would like to be notified whenever such events occur. Especially it comes for the knowledge session creation or work item registration, work item handler registration. This is especially important when you have work item handlers that are session aware. So they need to have a session to operate properly. One of the examples for this is a human task. Human task needs to have session to be able to, once the human task is completed, it should resume the process instance to move on. And that's why it requires the session. So here we have the execution engine callback with a number of different methods that will be called by the execution engine on different events. So we have the pre-knowledge base create, post-knowledge. So it's, in general, it's just pre and post pattern for different elements. Yeah, for multi-tenancy, it's very simple. As I said, it's just to provide a separate bundles per tenant and register them with different properties and provide configurable resolvers that are able to understand how the tenant is configured and how it should find the proper execution engine. Of course, there is a question about security because it's very simple to say, yeah, I am this tenant by providing a particular property within the context. But still, you can have this enhanced and resolvers will react not only on the simple properties, but it can make use of the application server security mechanisms as well. So you can say, okay, I would like to check if the request context is in particular role. It was authenticated, it was authorized, so I can trust this request context to deliver the execution engine. And of course, this is not the completed solution, so most likely there will be a lot of features to be included, and the whole point of having this presentation is to share this concept with wider audience and see if that makes sense or it's completely useless and no one will really like to use it. So it's definitely to get a feedback and see how it goes later on. Yeah. Still in a very, very early evaluation phase. There is a piece of code that you can give it a try. It is prepared like a POC that you have the application server with 3 versions of Drools and jBPM, which is 5.2, 5.3, and 5.4, the latest master stuff from jBPM. And it has 2 bundles. 2 versions of a bundle. One is tied to 5.3, the other is tied to the master branch. With a very simple client application, web application that makes use of it. A very fancy UI, like a 3 fields. Yep. Yeah, I think we have some time, so maybe you can give it a very short try with showing how it works. The platform delivers 2 Maven archetypes. One is to build the process bundles. So you just generate a Maven project that comes with a pre-configured bundle activator, which is able to call the execution engine factory with a particular version number and build the engine, register it in OSGi service registry, and just be ready for execution. So maybe we can just give it a try like this in a minute. Was it something else here? Yeah. We can, if you have any questions, we can just take the questions now and then just give it a try with a very, very short demo. Nope? Okay.
Okay, first of all, I think this is great. This is just what jBPM file means. In jBPM file, you have an
Mhm.
Common problems that you have when you have to implement jBPM 5 in an enterprise environment. So my question is this work part of the JBoss, I mean, or is something that you're doing by your own, and where we can get this and where we can use it?
Yeah. Still on evaluation phase, so it wasn't even promoted as a pet project. So it's still on my GitHub account. So if you like to give it a try, then I definitely encourage you to do that. I will really push forward this, and hopefully we can make this as an extension, because I completely agree with Chris and the rest of the core team that JPM engine should be as lightweight as possible. That's why it was as a separate module, as an extension to that. So we shouldn't, just put inside stuff that will make it more and more heavy, and will kind of, since it is JBoss AS specific. Of course, it was designed with an idea that it should be portable to any other OSGi compliant container. It wasn't verified on it, but it should be capable of doing that. The OSGi, the JBoss modules are just to compose all the dependencies in one place. They're not just because we have JBoss modules, so we use them. It's just to bundle everything in one place and do not care about exposing different OSGi services and then trying to tie them together. That's why the module for jBPM will expose a single service. This is only execution engine factory. No other services from Drools and jBPM. Because as Chris mentioned as well, the libraries from jBPM and Drools, they are OSGi-fied. So you can just drop them with the bundle manifest, and they will be available as services as well. So we can just pick them up. But then, of course, you rely on the direct connection to a certain APIs. And of course, here as well, but a very, very, very simplified. That just abstracted stuff. Any other questions? Yes?
So the purpose of this would be so that you could use OSGi mechanisms to get reference to a JBPM work context rather than just having the web interface using Governor to access what's in the repository. How does this relate to the Governor repository?
Yeah, Governor repository are still in the picture. The thing is that either your process bundle will contact, using, for example, knowledge agent as well, contact the governor to get the artifacts from it, or you can embed them inside the process bundle. Definitely recommended is to use governor. And of course, this is still, because it doesn't make sense to package the artifacts that are already in the repository. So definitely make use of governor is recommended here as well. The whole idea is that that's the kind of alternative to having either embedded mode, so you have your application and you embed all the stuff from JBPM and Drools to make it run, to execute the processes and rules, or to have the default with the console and embedded session within the console. This gives you an alternative approach that you can have platform that delivers all the functionality that the execution engine has, and you just put, okay, I would like to use this part of the platform to deliver my business processes. And I have the application that says, yeah, I need to use the process, but I don't care who delivers that. Just submit my request, start the process is running. You can still interact with the task service. This is, at this point, the task service is completely out of the picture. Exactly. For the moment, there is a single task service. But it could be, of course, if you use the embedded mode, the local task service, it could be embedded in the process or in the execution engine as well. I think I just skip the last point here. There are some limitations, as usual. And the main one is the persistence in the OSGi bundles on JBoss AS7. JBoss AS7, at least when I last time checked, did not support JPA within the within the OSGi bundles. So if you embed a persistence XML into your OSGi bundle, it will fail to deploy. There is a workaround for that, you need to have another component that will bootstrap the entity manager factory. Entity manager factory will be registered in JNDI. So process bundles can look up the JNDI entity manager factory and start doing the persistence properly. Of course, there will be a lot of questions about transactions, how transactions are handled with that. This wasn't yet confirmed how it will look like and how it will interoperate with JEE stuff. Because, yeah, CDI, and I think that there is a work in progress to provide a CDI injection of OSGi services as well. So once that will be in place, probably that will get even more colors. Anyone else? Yes?
The jBPM runtime is actually running not embedded in your application, but in a separate runtime container. You can use this API to actually start the process remotely from another VM, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And could you do that also with the regular Drools API as well, or is it just for this one?
You know, in general, you can do that, but not directly out of the box, because you need to have something that will expose that on the remote interface. I was about to mention something, I forgot. Yeah, any other questions? Comments? Does it make sense? So, yeah, raise a hand for a contribution. There's a lot of work to be done. Yeah, and here we have the, let's see if I have a network on. Yeah, very short guide, what's in this POC stuff. Let's put it very quickly. Download sections as well. So we have the platform, which is the JBoss AS 7.7.1.1 final, I guess, with everything embedded. Here is the source of the process bundle that is deployed in this package, and the source code on GitHub. So maybe we can just give it a very quick Sheraton, yeah, sponsored by Sheraton. Yeah, this is the fancy UI. Why it's so bad? So, just to say about what we have on the platform, we have the, maybe I can show that as well. Yeah, the Hello Web is this. This is the client. This is the client that will use the execution engine from the platform. We have a simple OSGi, OSGi servlet. It pretty much does what was said. Just look up the resolver manager. Once it finds it, look up the execution engine using the HTTP request context. Gets the session with the business key default and start the process given by the identifier from the request and properties. Very simplified. So we have not here. User task should be there. 200. And this is our deployment. So we have on the JBoss AS 7, you just drop your OSGi bundle into deployments, and it will be deployed and registered on the OSGi service directly. And so we have, just a second. Here we have the, should have, we should have the, here we have the, what are the processes deployed in the process bundle version 2.0 snapshot. So we can simply just start it. Oh, we don't. I probably forgot something. Just give me a second. User task version. Yeah, it was with dot, not dash. Yeah, now we have the user task started. If you look at the very fancy console, we see that the process has started with the session internal identifier 0, and those are the elements printed out by the process event listener. So we have the user task process that went through the start process and the hello. Make sure that we have it. We have the human task view for the first time after we start. Yeah, we have the task here. We can just see if the process completed. We can see that process has completed after the task has been completed as well. And the same we have, for example, if you want to, you have the script task, and script task is deployed on both. Here we have the script task execution for version 2.0. And the version 2.0 has more stuff registered for the execution engine callback. On the callback, you have the process event listener that prints out the information. You have the work item handler for human tasks. And of course, different definition of the processes. This was done for version 2.0. And if we do the script task for 1.0, we see that it's only printed out the script. Yes?
Once you started a process in a particular version, can you continue that process instance using a different version of the process?
No.
Once you started it, it's like
No, the whole idea is that you continue with what version you started on. Yeah. Yeah, the interesting part of it is that you could, for example, if you have the service task that embeds the Java code, since OSGi will make it isolated, you can embed your services, Java services, within the bundle. And the engine will invoke your version of the Java class, even if it has the same signature and so on, since you have the isolation on the OSGi service layer. And of course, if you don't want to embed it in your OS process bundle, you can always import from another bundle. This is still pure OSGi, so you can still import it. Right, I guess that was everything from my side. Any other questions? Thank you.